In the early 1920s, America entered the Prohibition era, a tumultuous period when the 18th Amendment banned the manufacture and sale of alcohol, inadvertently creating a flourishing criminal underworld. During this time of economic transition following the First World War, banks across the rural Midwest held substantial cash reserves, but often lacked adequate security measures, making them attractive targets for a new breed of mobile criminals who could strike quickly and disappear across state lines before law enforcement could coordinate a response. Against this backdrop of social upheaval and limited inter-jurisdictional cooperation, Edward James Adams emerged as one of the most violent and prolific criminals of the era, a man whose 14-month rampage across Kansas, Missouri, and Iowa would leave 7 people dead, including 3 police officers, and fundamentally expose the limitations of early 20th century law enforcement. Edward James Adams was born on April 23, 1887, though some records indicate he was originally named W.J. Wallace before adopting the Adams surname. His father died when he was young, leaving his family in difficult financial circumstances that shaped his early years. By profession, Adams worked as a barber, a respectable trade that required steady hands and the ability to interact smoothly with customers, skills that would later serve him in cultivating a charming and disarming persona. Despite his conventional occupation, Adams was drawn to gambling and the criminal underworld that surrounded Kansas City's illegal establishments. Unlike many criminals of his era who operated from poverty and desperation, Adams appeared to be driven by a combination of thrill-seeking behavior and a profound disregard for human life that would become increasingly apparent as his criminal career progressed. Early associates described him as charismatic and persuasive, capable of recruiting accomplices and maintaining loyalty even as the violence of his crimes escalated. The transformation from petty criminal to killer began in 1920 when Adams teamed with the Major brothers for a robbery attempt at a gambling den in Kansas City, Missouri. During the botched robbery, a shootout erupted, and gambler Frank Gardner was killed in the exchange. Adams and his accomplices were quickly apprehended, and in February 1921, Adams was sentenced to life imprisonment for murder. His partners, the Major brothers, received lighter sentences of only 5 years after pleading guilty to robbery charges. This disparity in sentencing may have fueled Adams's growing resentment toward the justice system and his determination never to be captured alive again. What happened next would demonstrate both Adams' cunning and the inadequacy of prisoner transport security in that era. While being transported to the Missouri State Prison in Jefferson City, Adams made a daring escape by jumping off the moving train. Within days of his escape, now a fugitive from a life sentence, Adams had already resumed his criminal activities with renewed intensity and violence. On February 11, 1921, just days after his train escape, Adams joined forces with Julius Finney to rob a bank and general store in Cullison, Kansas. The crimes netted them modest funds but demonstrated Adams' immediate return to criminal behavior despite the serious consequences he already faced. 6 days later, Adams was captured near Garden Plain after wrecking a stolen vehicle under a bridge. Convicted of bank robbery, he was sentenced to serve 10 to 30 years at the Kansas State Prison in Lansing, in addition to his existing life sentence in Missouri. But imprisonment could not contain Edward Adams. In August 1921, he escaped again, this time with 3 other inmates. While one was quickly recaptured, Adams and the others remained at large and immediately formed what would become known as the Adams Gang, recruiting criminals including a man named Fintelman. By September 1921, the gang embarked on an extraordinarily violent crime spree that would terrorize the region. They robbed approximately $10,000 from banks in Rose Hill and Hayesville, Kansas. During the Hayesville robbery, Adams brutally pistol-whipped 82-year-old James Creville without apparent provocation, and the elderly man later died from a fractured skull. This marked the first time Adams was directly responsible for killing someone outside of a gunfight, revealing an escalating willingness to use lethal violence even against defenseless victims. On October 8, 1921, police attempted to trap the gang near Annalee, Kansas, but the criminals managed to escape after a fierce gunfight that left Deputy Benjamin Fisher wounded. 11 days later, the gang stole approximately $500 in silver from a bank near Osceola, Iowa, demonstrating their willingness to operate across state lines. Law enforcement officers pursued them and caught up with the gang near Murray, Iowa, where Sheriff Ed West and other officers confronted the criminals. Another violent shootout ensued, leaving several policemen wounded. And when a local farmer named Charles William Jones attempted to intervene, Adams shot and killed him before the gang escaped in a stolen vehicle. The gang continued their rampage by robbing 11 stores in Muscoda, Kansas, and abducting 2 motorcycle police officers outside Wichita, stealing their motorcycles and setting them on fire in a brazen act of contempt for law enforcement. On November 5, 1921, Adams committed what investigators believed was a crime of passion when he shot and killed patrolman A.L. Young in cold blood while the officer was on duty in Wichita. The motive was reportedly a romantic rivalry over a woman who had chosen the company of the officer over the outlaw. The violence reached its climax on November 20, 1921, when 2 motorcycle policemen pulled over a vehicle carrying Adams and his associate Frank Foster. A shot rang out from the vehicle, killing patrolman Robert Fitzpatrick, though it remained unclear whether Adams or Foster fired the fatal shot. The outlaws sped away and later that night ran out of gasoline at a farm, where Adams attempted to steal a vehicle from farmer George Oldham. When Oldham resisted, Adams shot and killed him. Adams returned to Wichita in the stolen vehicle, but his time was running out. He hid until November 22, 1921, the day of Officer Fitzpatrick's funeral, calculating that most of the police force would be attending the service. He planned to rent a car and leave town permanently, but when he approached a garage, the proprietor recognized him and immediately contacted police. 3 officers arrived at the scene: Detective Charles Hoffman and officers Charles Bowman and D.C. Stuckey. When they confronted Adams, he drew his weapon and opened fire. Detective Hoffman lunged forward and seized Adams, but the killer worked his gun hand free and shot Hoffman at point-blank range, killing him instantly. Adams then fired at Officer Bowman, wounding him. Officer D.C. Stuckey, positioned behind a pillar, took careful aim and shot Adams 3 times, finally ending his violent rampage. Edward Adams died at age 34, attributed with 7 murders, including 3 Wichita policemen, committed in just over 14 months. He had wounded at least a dozen others during his spree. In a practice common to that era, Adams's body was publicly displayed at the city undertaking parlor, where more than 9,000 people came to view the slain outlaw in what authorities described as a celebration of the end of his reign of terror. In the aftermath, 18 people were arrested as accomplices and associates of Adams, with 4 sent to the Kansas penitentiary, and Frank Foster receiving a life sentence. The Edward Adams case exposed critical vulnerabilities in the criminal justice system of the early 1920s, particularly the ease with which dangerous criminals could escape custody during transport and the difficulty law enforcement agencies faced in coordinating across county and state boundaries when pursuing mobile criminals. His ability to escape imprisonment twice and continue killing demonstrated that prisoner security protocols were dangerously inadequate. The case also illustrated how the Prohibition-era social disruption created conditions where violent criminals could operate with relative impunity across rural areas, striking quickly and disappearing before coordinated responses could be mounted. While Adams was technically a spree killer rather than a serial killer due to the rapid succession of his crimes without significant cooling-off periods, his case contributed to evolving discussions about criminal psychology, the importance of secure prisoner transport, and the urgent need for better communication systems between law enforcement jurisdictions that would eventually lead to improvements in regional and national coordination of criminal investigations.